So tonight we have a time for checking in, of course, but also questions and answers. Hopefully I have answers about your practice or about any of the material that we've covered so far. So who would like to go first? And give us your name for those of us, because we got people coming and going, so that people can identify.
My name is Mike.
Mike.
The two things I would share this week are, so last week I had mentioned that I was starting to have kind of a sense of losing my self-identity. And that's kind of continued this week a little bit, even though it's felt a little sadder this week, but partially because it's the lack of wanting to do things, like things that I used to, and it's not that I'm not saying I'm depressed, but I don't have this burning desire to be as busy and active as I always kind of have kept myself. The other thing that I'm noticing in my head, so, you know, you sit and you watch thoughts and you try not to get engaged, involved with them. And then my head says, oh, look, you did a good job. Go Team Mike, let's bring another thought on. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, I've got this whole dialogue in my head going on about, like, it's on my side now, but it's still thinking. It's like, how do I get rid of that? So that's been my insight this week.
That condition is called spiritual materialism, where the practice and whatever insights we have become another possession of the ego. And yes, we have to let that go.
Well, I'm thoroughly possessed.
Now, listen carefully. As the mind sees what's going on. Now, I know some of you have done a Vipassana retreat. So the Sanskrit would be Vipassana. And it's an irregular root. It's Drish Pashyati. So we get words like darshan, the vision of something. But pashyami means I see. Pashyana means seeing. Vipassana means deep insight into what the F is going on. That's what the word means. You oftentimes will hear it translated as insight meditation. It's very, very true. So we don't give up the world out of some heroic action. Nobody's going to give you a gold star for renouncing the world. We give up the world when we see what's really going on. And those of us who are in the 12-step traditions, it's so classic, it's so right there. Because what usually happens to a person before they decide to get clean and sober or give up being a food addict or whatever it is? Any of you from those traditions know what we do first? What happens?
That's right.
Well, what happens before the surrender?
Shit's got to stop.
And what do we call that condition?
Hitting rock bottom.
Bottom, yes. We get sick and tired of being sick and tired. It used to work. You know, first the drink takes the person. No, first the person takes the drink, then the drink takes the person, and finally the drink takes the drink. Something like that. I get confused. But the idea is pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. So, what happens as you quit medicating the mind by fixing it, eating at it, screwing at it, Netflixing at it, workaholic addict, you know, whatever we do to not be with the underlying dukkha, the suffering. When we are awake enough to really see that, when we see vanity, we keep doing the same thing over and over again. And it's so boring, it's so repetitive, and it just doesn't work anymore. Does this sound familiar to anybody? It's a very high state. And we have stories about this in the scripture, in the Buddhist tradition. So Siddhartha, he leaves the palace and he goes around and he sees the world and he comes back, and what's his insight? Why bother? It's all suffering. It's all temporary. And one of the greatest scriptures in the Hindu tradition is called Yoga Vasishta. It's the story of the enlightenment of Lord Rama. Same thing. Lord Rama leaves the palace. He's only 16. Travels around the palace. He's been wine, women, and song. I mean, he's just been a rich kid. And he sees suffering. He sees the vanity of everything and disease and death. He comes back and he's like super depressed. He doesn't want to do anything. Why bother? Because it's just empty. It tastes like ashes. And everybody in the palace says, oh God, we need to get him some Prozac. And then Vasishta, who's the court sage, says, no, this is mature vairagya. Vairagya means dispassion or detachment. The root is raga, which means passion for something. And the prefix is V. V means either a superlative or sometimes the opposite. But it's not aragya. Is the prefix that means not. This is a rock. It is aragya, has no feelings. Vairagya is not aragya. It means I've taken my passions to a higher plane. I have a different playground. Why? Because the world has just gotten too small. Just doesn't do it anymore. I've bottomed out. Now, when you talk to the addict or the alcoholic, hey, put the drug down, put the plug in the jug, go get in recovery. I can't do that. This is my only friend. If you had my problems, you drink too. Not knowing what is the cause of the misery. So what yoga says and Buddhism if we slow down and quit medicating the mind with all sorts of fixing behaviors, and we really look at what's going on. You know, I'm annoyed and irritable, and discontent. Nothing's doing it for me anymore. That's actually a very high state. And there is mourning. There is grieving, Mike. You're right on course. In fact, you're such a textbook yogi. They wrote books about you 1,500 years ago. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, we were talking about Gita. One of my favorite verses is in chapter 2, and it's verse 55. And in verse 54, Arjuna says, how does the person of steady wisdom walk? How do they talk? How do they sit? How do they speak? And then we have 18 verses that describe the person of wisdom, the Sthita Prajna Purusha, the person of steady wisdom. And many times in scriptures, when we get a list, the most important is put up there first. So this is verse 55, the first verse in that list. When a person casts off all the desires of the mind, so Arthas Arjuna, and is satisfied in the self, by the self, then they're said to be a person of steady wisdom. So last week, when we were doing subject-object discrimination, I'm not the body, I'm not the feelings, I'm not the thoughts. Introvert the attentive faculty. Notice your essential nature. Who are you? I said, oh, there's nothing there. And when the mind comes home to that, when we soak the mind in Brahman, then we find something real that actually does satisfy the human. Is that useful, Mike?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent question, an excellent doubt. Because everybody goes through it, some of us more than others. But as we see the vanity of the world, it's all trinkets and baubles, it's all colored glass, it's not precious gems. And we see what happens. Everything you've ever invested in and thought, oh, this is who I am, this is what I am. I know many of your personal stories. I know some of you very identified with a job, with a possession, with a business. Very good at it. And what happens? The universe goes, well, time for you to become a renunciate. Am I wrong?
No.
And then the Buddhists call this the realm of the hungry ghosts. I'm going to try to get it back. Then we get nasty trying to hang on to it. Stuff like that. So, all right, who's next?
I'll go. Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
I meditated every day. And a lot of the days I was like, I do not have time to meditate. And I think the one day I literally meditated for 5 minutes. But what you just said about, we're so identified, or I am so identified with my identity being that I work. And I work so much and I feel like I'm so good at what I do that to not have that, not that I think I wouldn't have an identity, but I am constantly throughout the day exhausted, and because of the work I do, which incidentally I enjoy, and looking for respite from it. So it's like what's
Rest is different than respite. There's a difference.
I'm not sure I'm using it properly then.
Respite means I want to get away from it.
I want to get it not away from it. I just want it to not make me so exhausted.
Yeah.
But I was noticing all week, like by the end of the day, I'm like, I just want to sit on my couch and do a crossword puzzle. I want to check out. I want to
Mhm.
have half a glass of pink wine. I want, what's a delicious food? Like, what's a thing?
To fix me, self-soothe is
And
what the psychologist
so I
said.
got to this point where I'm like, Jenny, I think you just have to be uncomfortable. And I couldn't accept it.
What do you do
to get out
as
of
as a job?
I run a preschool.
You run a preschool. Good for you. A lot of work. And the problem is how to live a life of balance.
Yes.
And the Buddha talked about the middle path. Don't eat too much, don't eat too little. Don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. Don't work too much, don't work too little. And actually, our efficiency declines when we're stressed. So my suggestion, which you haven't asked for,
What's your suggestion, Jim?
is to think a bit in terms of balance. How do you live a balanced life? And because what happens with the stress that you have, when you get home, you reduce yourself, frankly, to an animal. You're like a dog. I want to eat. I want to go unconscious. Turn off. It's not a creative life at that point. And there is a way for you to find balance. I don't know what it is. I'm not smart enough. But it's there. But you have to make it a priority. We need to make serenity our top priority. Swamiji used to talk about Americans. He said Americans are so proud of their standard of living, but they've lost their standard of life. And it was horrible. I'm old enough to remember how hard unions worked for the 40-hour work week for people. We don't have child labor like we used to. But after 2008 and the financial crisis, what businesses did say, well, I know what we're going to do. We'll have people work 60 hours a week and pay them the same we did at 40. Especially in like IT, stuff like that. Do you know young people? All of them. They work horrible hours. So we're going backwards in the quality of life. So we have to value Sabbath. Sabbath, Shabbat. Wonderful principle. On the seventh day, God rested. You know, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. The spiritual message in that is we need time. Now, are you in a relationship?
Mhm.
Do you have to schedule date night?
Yes, because he lives 25 miles away from me.
And if you don't schedule it, what happens?
Doesn't happen.
You all hear that?
Doesn't
It doesn't happen if you don't make time. So your spiritual practice is having date night with God. You need to make the time, or it's not going to happen. You have relationships like this, people passing like ships in the night. Now, you do set priorities. Do you head off to school without brushing your teeth or showering?
The school is actually in the back of my house, so.
Do you
I
go
always
into
have
the
time to brush
school,
my teeth.
brush your teeth and shower? Yeah. Do you wear stinky clothes?
No.
So you have time to take care of your hygiene. I think you should have time to take care of your spiritual hygiene. But you have to make it a priority. You have to make it a priority. There's no other way to do it than I know.
You just do it.
You just do it. Just like you take a shower, put on clean clothes, brush your teeth, brush your hair before you go into the kids, right? You don't do the bunny slippers in the bathroom. Maybe you do.
They wouldn't care.
But you don't.
I
Their
don't.
parents would care. All right. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
I'll go.
Sure.
This class has been so good for me because
Tell us,
I
Jay.
have been Wendy here. I've been doing an hour of meditation every single morning and usually another 20 minutes at night. And it's changing my life. I've had over the last 8 years periods where I meditated more. In fact, when I first started being able to do longer meditation was when I went to your retreat, however many years ago that was. And we were doing, hour meditations, but then I'll stop doing it and I'll do it and I'll stop doing it. But this feels a little different because I'm making the commitment to do it every morning, first thing when I get up. I don't check my phone. I don't have a cup of tea, which I used to do. And then I would get distracted, like, oh, I got to check, I got to send an email. I'm just like, no, I'm going to meditate. And I can't even say how it's changing my life, but it is. Like, I can't verbalize it in any way.
The way I would frame it is when you're aware and you can see 90% of our healing is just becoming aware of what I'm doing, what's going on.
Yeah. And that's happening much more. Just noticing thoughts and going, oh, no, thank you. Yeah. Noticing patterns. Oh, no. And sometimes not, often also not, probably more not. But one question I have for you is like, if I, just close eyes, get quiet, I cannot find a me at all. And yet, eyes open here, there seems to be a me. And it's a little confusing.
We will go into this more in depth next week when we
Okay.
talk about what is the ego.
Okay.
So Kathopanishad says the Lord created the senses with outgoing tendencies. Here by the senses, we essentially mean the mind. So what happens as consciousness functions through the subtle intellect, the mind, the body, and the sense organs, and illumines the world, a shadow self seems to arise. The word for shadow in Sanskrit is chaya, means either shadow or reflection. So the scriptures will use the term chit chaya. It's a shadow of consciousness. So, like any other shadow, it appears when light is obscured. See? So, when you're looking out at the world, now the Buddhists will use the term dependent origination. This individual knower of the world and the world rise together. So the phony self, the fake self, sometimes it's called pratibimba, like a reflection in a mirror. I like to use the term jiva bhavana. Bhavana means an attitude or a feeling. It arises when you don't look at it or for it. It's an assumed self. And in fact, it's not bad. You need it to function in the world.
Mhm, mhm.
You know, I got up this morning, I took a shower, I made some lentil soup today. Nothing wrong with that. But when you slow down and introvert your attention and notice the noter, you see, no, there's no me there. There's no person. There's just the space of awareness. There's not chit-chaya, there's chit-akasha, the space of pure awareness. So what you want to do is learn to make the distinction. This is the subtlest of discrimination between the idea of self and the real nature that we are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know how, but yes.
So ego is a function in the Vijnana Maya Kosha. We will cover that next week. The main thing to know is it's not you. Even the word ahankara in Sanskrit. Kara means like to be caused, to make, or to do. So it's I maker thoughts. That is what ego is. It's not, and sometimes in scripture you'll see Jivatman, the personal sense of self, person that's going to strive hard for liberation, the thing that reincarnates into, all that sort of stuff. We'll go into that next week. But it's like the person you are in the dream.
Right.
Do you incarnate into the dream? Are you in the dream, or is the dream in you?
The dream is in me.
Wendy is just a dream character.
I just got that in some different way.
Yeah.
Because there's the awareness in the dream of the
And you are aware of the dream, Wendy. And when you wake up, you're aware of the waker, Wendy.
right.
Now listen very carefully. This is for you. The shift between the dreamer and the waker is a gross shift. Alarm goes off. Oh man, what a weird dream. The shift between egoism, I think I'm Wendy, and oh no, in the space of consciousness, is a subtle shift. Incredibly profound, but it's just Next person.
David, I don't have much to check in on. I've heard
Hi, David.
Con, something to share. So I've not been able to really be present here for the past few weeks. The leading reason was I was working on forming a business. And so it's been about 10 days that I formed my own LLC. And the reason I'm bringing it up is prior to filing for state authorization, I had been told by one of my clients that what I do for work is I help South Korean doctors who are seeking medical residency here in the United States. I help them apply for the process. So as I was helping out this client, she said, if I get accepted, I will bring you a couple more future clients. Unfortunately, she did not get accepted. And I noticed that as much as she was feeling entitled to acceptance, I might have had the same entitlement to her bringing me the first cohort of my clients once I form a business. So I had to make a distinction between me feeling sad for the fact that a client that I had supported throughout a year did not get accepted. There's a legitimate mourning because I've really poured my heart and soul regardless of her bringing me future clients. That versus the mourning of losing that entitlement. And once I drew that distinction, I could reduce my suffering. I could honor my sadness over my client not achieving a better result. That I think was coming from a good heart and a genuine feeling, whereas the latter, the sense of indignation, oh shoot, it did not go the direction that I wanted or it should have. And I was actually quite surprised how I was able to make that distinction relatively quickly and actively accepted this is where I am. And once I accepted this is where I am, I was also able to look at my situation under a more favorable light. Oh, this would actually give me some more time to work on developing my website, creating a program so that once new people actually come and receive my service, I will appear more prepared and therefore also help them. And I attribute this part resilience and part awareness back to the practice. And that's what brought me back here.
And what I would
Yeah.
recommend is if you, were you at the lesson we did on karma yoga?
No, I was not.
Let's see, go on the YouTube. All these lessons are up
Yeah.
on YouTube. And I think that was lesson 2 or 3. But that will, the basic thing is what the tradition says is we have a right only to work, never to the fruits. Gotta give up.
Can you repeat that, Jim?
Thy right is to work alone, never to its fruits. That's what Krishna says in the Gita. It's all we get in life is work. The results, you work really hard to help this lady, doesn't make it.
It's funny, there's a saying in Korean, which I'm pretty sure is inspired by Chinese tradition, called Jin Insa Daechonmyo. Jin Insa means the person toils to their best ability, but the result is up to the sky.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly the same. Exactly the same.
The work is done by the person, but the result is decided by this external independent forces that we can't really control.
All right, next person.
I'll go next. I'm Francesca. So I meditated. It seems like I meditate like 6 days. There's always one day that I miss. But today I was thinking about that I want to sort of achieve this sort of neutrality And so I was practicing that, and what that would be like, and sort of in a meditative state. And what became very clear was that it's really just being aware of what is going on. And for me, sound is very, very pleasing and comfortable. And so I felt like I have a way forward of sort of honing my meditative practice to really pay attention to sound. And that is how I will get into the state of neutrality. And then there's also this sort of beauty and delight in the observation of sound, or what, whatever, when the mind is quiet. But then what you were saying, Mike, about the sort of sadness, I noticed that I would call it maybe the ego mind, of the thoughts, don't like that. That part feels like there's nothing in it for that part. It's like, it's just, there's nothing there for it, and it doesn't like that, and it kind of gets sad. But it's really interesting to see that. And so I'm feeling really, because meditation has been such a struggle for me, because my mind really doesn't want to give up. But now I feel like that I have a focus that I think may very well work for me.
We'll address some of that in the lesson tonight. So I think we've done everybody but Trevor, right?
I think, right? Yeah.
Oh, Foz too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have been doing the meditation, and amazing thing has been happening, and I don't know how to connect it to the meditation, but things have changed for an unknown reason. I cannot figure it out, but Rumi says the seeker becomes what it is that he's seeking, become that. I guess that's the bottom of it. But it was the Persian New Year this last Monday. And this is an example. I've been calling this family member of mine in New York, like every year, but this year he called me, and he's older, and out of the blue he just said, "You have been calling me every year. I really wanted to appreciate that. It's just been helping me with the energy that you have calling me, and saying Happy New Year, Iranian New Year." I just didn't know what happened. I mean, what happened that this formula changed. But on a different note, I found a chant that helps me too. It's an Iranian chant that says, "Goftar neek, pendar neek, kirdar neek," good things, good thoughts, and good beliefs. So that chanting helps me too.
Great. Meditation itself will teach you to meditate. It's like riding a bicycle. Do it, and you'll find what works for you. Good work. Now, Trevor.
Sure, be brief. I've been more consistent with meditation, which feels good. And trying to be a little bit more gentle with myself instead of, the harsh critic. Thinking, trying to tug myself back a little more gently.
Let me stop just a minute.
Yeah.
This is for everybody. If in a 20-minute period, you can have moments of real quiet, you're doing very well.
Hmm.
In
That's
the
helpful.
end, the flow of thought is not going to be problematic. Don't worry about it. Just don't grab or hang on to it. I hope that's helpful. I may have given you all a wrong idea here.
That's helpful for me. It's just, it's my own stuff, but I'm like, I need to be better. One question I had after class last week. I feel like I spend a lot of time thinking about what I really want to be doing, what really fuels me, as opposed to what I think I want to be doing. And you've talked about that, Jim, right? It's Swadharma, is that the
Yeah.
word, right? And one thing that I'm having a difficult time reconciling is it feels to me like that concept suggests that there's some sort of like intrinsic dharma or whatever that we, you know, our unique selves want to be doing, should be doing. But that doesn't feel consistent with the self that doesn't have any object, right? Like that
No,
that
this
feels
is at
like,
the level of the personality.
uh-huh.
This is at the level of the personality. This is a preparatory exercise. Karma yoga is a preparatory exercise.
Okay.
And the point is, if you're fighting your actions
Mhm.
for 8 hours a day, it's going to be real hard to have quality life.
Sure.
And if you think finding the right job is the answer to all the problems of existence, that's not it either.
Right.
It just makes things a lot easier if you're riding the horse in the direction it's going.
Mhm. So it's like on a mental or emotional level that Swadharma or whatever, it's not the self.
Were you here when I gave the example of slicing tomatoes?
Mhm.
So you sharpen the knife first.
Mhm.
What this does is brings the mind into a state of quietude.
Mhm.
Then, when the mind is purified to some degree, then Atma Vichara, inquiry into my self nature, is effective. If the knife is dull, meaning my mind is agitated and gross, self-inquiry is not very efficacious.
Mhm.
Karma yoga is a knife sharpening process. Did that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, I think that's everybody here in the room. Anybody online want to share? Have a question?
Jim, this is Preeti. I have been trying to meditate every morning. Oftentimes it's like after a meeting, I'm like, I have to prep for this meeting. I can't focus before then. And it just continues to be like a struggle to do more than 10 minutes. I find my mind just drifting to work a lot and less so than usual. Like I will say that my work gets to me a little less these days, but still a little bit of an uphill climb.
Again, here's a principle. I don't know whether it'll be helpful, but at least will help us understand. The mind prefers the familiar. Frequently, it will prefer the familiar to the good. I was talking with a fellow known for 10, 15 years. And he's had an on and off relationship, he's gay, with a guy who's a drug addict. And he really loves him. And then the drug addict relapses. Oh, why did I do this again? And he keeps going back to this because it's familiar. So what we want to do with practice, in the beginning, your mind's going to have resistance because it's not familiar. But if you keep at it, then it becomes a new habit. And then you enjoy it. Not because it's good, but because it's familiar.
Mhm.
But you can't wait for something fantastic or special to happen where, oh, then I'm going to like meditation.
Mhm.
It doesn't work that way. This is where what we call purushartha comes in, which means self-effort. Means the work that we do. I don't know if that's useful.
It is. Yeah, I think that definitely resonates, that this preference for the familiar, and that makes sense. So yeah, the more I work at it too, will be more familiar.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else online want to share?
Yeah, I'll share, Jim. I meditated every day this week. But last couple of weeks, I think an interesting insight came up, which I thought was interesting, how a lot of my behavior at work is validation seeking. So I have so many projects going on, and a lot of that ultimately I've realized comes down to just seeking validation. So I thought that was an interesting observation I had, and also realized that that same tendency is there in a lot of the rest of my life. So that was very interesting.
Yes. Good awareness. Good awareness. All right. So tonight's lesson, anybody else online want to share before I go on? So tonight's lesson is about the gunas. Guna in Sanskrit means a quality, mostly a quality of mind. It's a pun in Sanskrit. It means one of the words for rope. So we are bound by the qualities of mind, like we're bound like a rope. That's the pun. So the teaching comes from an older philosophy called Sankhya. And in the Sankhya philosophy, there's these three gunas: tamas, the principle of darkness, covering, delusion, inactivity; rajas, the principle of activity, of striving, of creating; and sattva, the principle of non-activity, of clarity, of knowledge, of stillness. And in the Sankhya philosophy, when those three gunas are in perfect balance, no manifestation takes place. When they go out of manifestation, the phenomenal world shows up. Put that aside. We're going to just take those three terms. And what yoga does is they apply it as a map of the human mind, and then gives us some techniques of how to deal with it. So, tamas, that's when I'm shut down, when I'm depressed, when I have inertia, when I have lethargy, when I'm confused, when I'm despondent, when I want to just stay in bed and put the covers over, when I want to get loaded, when I want to eat the entire refrigerator, when I want to spend all the day on Netflix. This is darkness covering illusion and delusion, is the principle of tamas. Rajas is the principle of activity. It's where striving, where ambition, where competition, where approval is. Now, Rajas is where all my suffering is. Jealousy, envy, competition, comparison, all that stuff is in that middle guna. What many of us do to deal with the pain of that is go into tamas. You come home from work and you want to have a glass of wine. See? I want to rest, but I want to self-soothe. I just want to take a break. All sorts of ways of doing it. Problem is, it doesn't work because it's impermanent. You're exhausted, you go to sleep. Sleep is pure tamas. But what happens in the morning? You wake up. Sattva is when I have contentment, when I haven't got any jonesing for anything. I'm not under the tyranny of the addictive state of mind. When I see myself, nature for what it is, when I see the world for what it is, and I act in a creative, natural way in the world. Someone once told me, it might have been you, David, in fact. Have you studied taiko drumming?
Not taiko.
Someone, he's a drummer, percussionist, excuse me. Someone who studied taiko drumming, their taiko master. It's a Japanese school of drumming. Said you want to practice taiko drumming until you can drum like a child. So if you ever see a youngster who's maybe 3, they pull all the pots and pans out of the cupboard, turn them upside down and get the wooden spoons. They're just having so much fun. You ever seen kids do that? That's how we're meant to work in the world. So sattva doesn't mean sitting in a cave drooling in your diaper. There's energy and there's creativity, but there's clarity, and we don't have what we call kartavya. Kartavya is literally translated as obligatory action, but it means I'll be happy when, it'll be better if, gimme, 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 gimme. I can remember, it was several years ago. It was a beautiful spring or summer day, and I was just walking across Grand Avenue in the crosswalk, and there was this mother there with 2 kids, and they were about 4, maybe one was 5. And one of the little girls she couldn't help herself. She just had to jump up and down and twirl around and then just run across the street. You ever see kids do that? That's fun.
Every day.
That's how you and I are meant to live. And for those of us who come from the Christian tradition, the Master Jesus said, suffer little children to come unto me, for of them is the kingdom of heaven. Suffer here, that's old-timey language. It means allow the children to come. Because when we're in that sattvic state, we have a joy of living. And we see the world as it is. without these judgments. You know, you may see a woman and for you, she may be maybe fat or you don't like her hair or something. But what does her infant child think of her? And mama. So the mind, all of our minds will move through the three gunas, although for most of us, our minds will predominate. Even cultures will predominate in one of the gunas. How am I doing on time? So there are cultures where, you know, everybody just, like there are places in India where the guys, it's high unemployment, the men just go to the tea stall and drink tea and get drunk every day. That's a tamasic culture. America is largely a rajasic culture. Earn and burn. More, better, different. The one who dies with the most toys wins. And then there are cultures that are very silent. There are places in the world that have a long tradition of a Buddhist culture with very different values. But our minds will move through it. So the way in which I can demonstrate what our minds do is pizza. So hanging out and all of a sudden, I want pizza. I want pizza. I want a pizza. 45 minutes? Oh my God. All right. Rajas. Pizza cup. Take down. You put extra cheese on this.
And chilies.
Oh yeah. Sattva. No desire. Lives. The third. Then what happens next?
Tell us.
So that's the cycle the mind does. Rajas, Sattva, Tamas. Rajas, Sattva, Tamas. So what Krishna says in Gita, he says, "Oh Arjuna, be you ever beyond the gunas. Witness, watch the mind move through those three states." Now, after that, he says, "and ever remain in the sattvic state." Well, make up your mind, Krishna. Do you want me to be beyond the gunas or do you want me to be in the sattva guna? What he means here is, by and large, we be the witness of the mind states. But what is it that makes for the happiest mind? The happiest mind is the sattvic mind. So, what do we do if we wake up and we're in a really tamasic state? You're crunchy. You hate the world and everyone in it. Leave me alone. Let me review my miseries. You can't go from tamas directly into sattva. And this is where we have a problem. many of us, if we're really honest, we have a pretty heavy dose of tamas in our minds. And meditation, don't want to do that. I'd much rather read Fudge. Does a better job. How do I get out of tamas? 2 practices. First, well, the principle is stimulate the mind with rajas. When the going gets tough, the tough go shopping. Wait, I suppose we're supposed to renounce material. No, if your mind is tamasic, you stimulate it with desire. And desire prompted activity. You can do something like, just do one little thing. Maybe clean one drawer. One of the most effective ways to get the mind out of tamas is seva. Who can tell me what seva means?
Doing good for others.
Service,
right?
yes. Those of us in the 12-step program, we are taught you never say no to a program request. I don't care what your problem is, go work with another suffering addict or an alcoholic. It is a powerful way. Why? Because the tamasic mind is caught up in paranoid self-observation. It's all about me and all my problems, and why am I not getting mine, and I'm not getting my needs met. That's where the mind is. Sound familiar? Focus it on another. Call somebody up and say, I'm in a terrible place. Tell me your problems. Get me out of my damn self. Or go take a physical action to help another person. And many of us who've been yogis for a while find that we're much happier living lives of service. I had a fellow sit right over there several years ago and said, Jim, I'm just not like you. I'm a selfish guy, and I want to get ahead in life. And, I'm not making enough money, and I don't like where I'm living, and I don't want to have to sell my boat. I'm a selfish guy. And I said, I won't mention his name. I'm a selfish guy too. I really want to be happy. But I find service is a major component in that. Swamiji used to thunder, serve the society. Now, another major practice for getting the mind out of tamas is intense devotional practices. In fact, Swamiji was once asked, what is yoga's solution to mental illness? Mind you, 1,500 years ago, they didn't have Prozac or Xanax or anything like that. And he said, intense devotional practices and selfless service. So when the mind moves from tamas into rajas, that's when we can start practicing our karma yoga, renouncing our attachment to the sense of agency, renouncing our attachment to the fruits of action, striving to make the activity not about me, service in the yajna spirit. Remember those 5 elements? Act according to your heart, latent proclivities, in a spirit of selfless service, renouncing your attachment to the fruits of action and your identification with the sense of agency. And that's when meditation starts to become more and more efficacious. Now, how does this work in our meditation itself? I said this in the beginning, and I'll repeat it because it's so important. The grosser my mind, Sat was subtler, Rajas is a little grosser, Tamas is really gross. The grosser my mind, the more meditative supports I need. Jim, can I meditate while I'm on the exercise? If your mind is really gross, of course. Jim, do I need to use a mala when I chant my mantra? If your mind is gross, you might find the physical use of the mala helpful. But as your mind gets more subtle, we drop away the supports. I had a student for a while, and some teacher who says, oh, you have to chant your mantra 1,008 times every day. I've been doing this for years now, and I got nowhere. I just do it 1,008 times. So, let it go. Maybe what you need is some silence, some space. So with all the techniques that we have, the mind gets quiet, let it drop. Now, what is the most powerful way to maximize sattva? Ego says, I'll be happier by satisfying all my desires. And all yoga says, how's it working out for you? Yoga says, practice mature detachment, this equality of vision, accepting life on life's terms, being solution oriented. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. Cosmic teeter-totter. The more attached I am, the more controlling I am, the more I'm insistent on my way, the less my serenity. The more I let go, the more I turn it over, the more I surrender. Very simple. Don't believe me? Try it. All right, it's 9 o'clock. Now, before I let you go, we have 2 more lessons. After this class, the next offering we have is, have you got the book, the Atma Bodha book?
No, I'm getting it.
Is a 12-week course called Atma Bodha. And we're going to use this text by Adi Shankara, who's one of my spiritual heroes. Most people date him 788 to 820. So he's kind of like a spiritual Mozart. And it's in Sanskrit. It's beautiful poetry. Hopefully we'll have someone who can see, who can also chant the shlokas, the verses for us, and we'll break it open. It will take many of the ideas that we've covered in this survey course and go into more depth. So just out of curiosity, can I have a show of hands of who would be interested in the next class? Would someone count for me because I can't see?
Will it be held the same day and hour?
It's Thursday, 7:30. Same thing. How many?
6.
Okay.
Online also.
How many online?
There's me, Preeta, also Ganesh, there's 3.
Okay, I'll get 10 copies. And I think that'll be enough. And I'll have the books here for you. And we'll just start the week after this class. All right. That's it. Thank you all.